Thanks for joining early. Everyone, I really appreciate it. We'll start right at 7 o'clock. So again, thanks for joining early. This will be recorded. And then once it gets uploaded, I'll email it to you. It takes the IT people, maybe a couple of days, sometimes a week, to actually get it organized so they can send it to me and I can send it to you. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now. And just to let you know, we'll start right at 7 o'clock. Thank you for being early. And uh, we'll have the full hour if there's conversation and you want to share some things. And then I'll stay on if you have like individual questions. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I am direct messaging Christelle. She's wondering if you can hear me right now. If you can, will you give a thumbs up?
I can hear just fine.
Thank you, Christelle. I think we're good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm not going to start until exactly 7 o'clock because there's still people coming in. And last time I kind of made a point of people coming so that we could start right on time. So I'm going to mute myself. And when you come in, if you could mute yourself, that'd be great too. Thanks.
And I apologize. I thought it was Christelle. It's I'm sorry. Estefania Diaz. I'm sorry. I was responding to your message, not Christelle's.
Thank you.
Apologize.
Appreciate it. I was like, am I going deaf or I
No,
can't hear anything?
you're good. I'm sorry about mispronouncing your name.
It's okay, no worries.
Can you pronounce it for me?
Estefania.
Estefania. Estefania?
Yep,
Okay.
Estefania.
Okay.
So good evening, everyone. I just want to welcome you to the second Zoom session and apologize for the first Zoom session that was recorded, I think halfway there. But and again, I'll just say that they're all recorded. It does take time for the IT people at USBE to get it ready to be sent out to all of you. A couple of just general things. So the meetings are always scheduled from 7 to 8 o'clock, so 1 hour. They're recorded, and then the Zoom link sent out to you after IT at USB works on it. I'm sharing my screen with you, which is the interpreter course, the syllabus, which there's been some confusion about. The other thing is, when you have difficulties registering for the course registration is directly in the syllabus. I'll do a couple of revisions and then send it out again to everybody just to remind you. The reason Module 1 is due on April 15th is when I went in on Friday, of the 220 who are registered, 202 are actually in the course. But of the 202 that are in the course, only about 50% have answered. And I'll go back again on Friday and review all of Module 1 again. The big thing for the discussion posts is when I read the discussion post and it responds really thoroughly and completely to the prompt, and you've read other people's responses and shared with them. And I know there was some confusion about that. The preference for full credit is that you actually respond really thoughtfully and thoroughly with the first name of 2 other people who have responded. And a response is not one sentence, right? A response is a thorough, thoughtful response to another learner. So we're trying to create a virtual community of learners who are always learning with and from each other. So that's really kind of the point of the of the goal for discussions. The other thing that's very important is that even though I think I used cohort 2024, their syllabus, and didn't go through the total revisions, this one is a little bit closer to 2025. The course should be complete by June 30th. Cohort 2024 was September 30th. Now, the reason it's June 30th, or if you could even do it before then, is with the current administration, we really don't know if there's going to be any kind of federal funding at all for Title III or for any of the title programs. So, the sooner you complete the course and we can get a certificate to you from USBE, the better. People keep emailing me about, joining the next group or when can they register. And you can register anytime, but the goal, because there might not be a cohort 2026, we don't really know. Everything is kind of up in the air. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all those people who are interested in the USB interpreter course actually have access to this. And the attendance log is based on the sample that I sent out from last year. And last year there were, I did 8 Zoom sessions. I'm only doing 5 this year. And the responses in the Zoom log were very thorough and thoughtful because people were contributing their experiences about what they had actually experienced as interpreting in a school context. And remember, this is very different. People keep asking me about, if they can get the certificate because they received a certificate for medical interpretation. Okay, no, this is designed specifically for education. And the reason it's designed for education is that HB 305, which was passed unanimously in 2022, is state law that every single district, which oversees all the schools in Utah, must have a language access policy. And the model of the policy is on the Title III website. And if you want more details about every opportunity that's provided and all the resources, you can actually go to USBE Title III and you'll see the resources there and all the good work that districts are doing based on a competency-based ESL endorsement or the work they're doing with newcomers. And in the course catalog, there's a whole series of courses related to working with students learning English. So that's pretty much the background. If you want to, once I kind of finish going over one section, it'll be the first standard, how the course is organized. I'll stop and you can ask any questions and share any experiences that you want. But we'll go through the first standard first. And this is a national standard that's also used internationally related to the professionalism of being an interpreter. The other thing is I have like absolutely no control over any kind of funding for the district to pay interpreters that are certified. Title III is very clear because it's federal funding for supplemental, which means the civil rights obligation, and we do still have some civil rights. The civil rights obligation is that funding for language interpretation is the responsibility of the state, which means it should come out of your state funding, any translation services. And again, the reason this is important is if we don't have Title III funds, then based on the students who are designated English learners and the approximately $6 million of federal funds that Title III gets won't be available next year at all. So you have to think really strategically and maximize the opportunity of getting an interpreter's certification that focuses on implementing HB 302 for the language access policy, which we went over last week. The other thing is if you want to share, you can raise your hand. It's actually, you know, at the top of your screen. I'm not going to watch the chat because I can't watch the chat and respond to what's actually going on. I don't know, Bev, do you want to monitor the chat to see if there are any questions?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thanks. Beverly Behringer is one of my soulmates who works at Canyon School District, and she and I have been colleagues and close friends for quite a while, and doing the kind of work that we're very committed to in relationship to students learning English, those students who are immigrants, and most people don't really understand the funding. The funding for Title III also has 5% off the $6 million, and we identify all those districts and LEAs, if it so happens, that have a significant increase in immigrants, which is defined federally as those students who have interrupted formal education. And most people don't know that we've gone from funding one district maybe 6 years ago, which was Granite, to 6 districts now, Canyons being one of them. Canyons, Provo, Alpine, Nebo, and Jordan. So this is an example of, in general, that we have, you know, have always been a state welcoming people and community from a range of language communities to Utah. So this is a really good example of what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to go down to, and everybody can see my screen. Bev, yes? Okay. So again, this is the revised syllabus for cohort 2025. If the link is a personalized welcome that says pretty much the things that I've already said, there's an interpreter playlist, and I'm checking to make sure that the videos end up being on this list. It's challenging because the other thing is the playlist will have the date. So once you get to the playlist, you'll see 16 other videos that happened from the cohort 2024. And the reason it's different is last year, when I did a survey, people wanted an evening Zoom experience, and they also wanted one right after school. So you'll actually see 8 Zoom sessions, but doubled, so there'll be 16. And the one that you're looking for is this actual date, the date that this Zoom happens on, and the one that was last week on the 5th. Okay, so if you go down, and also someone asked me about this, about the Zoom meeting number. What I'm trying to do is the day before, I send out the link and the Zoom, the meeting ID and the passcode, just to make sure, because last time I think there was some confusion about that. And I'll also stay on a little bit longer if there are individual questions that are of a kind of like a personal nature, and because all the questions we want to respond to are the ones that, you know, pretty much have an impact on the entire group. And again, this will be recorded and uploaded to the playlist. Here's the course registration. It opened in February. So the link at the bottom, when you click on it, it'll give you a portal for registering for the USBE Canvas. Okay, someone last week asked a really good question. I can't remember, I think it was Ruben, asked the question about, well, it's not showing up in my Davis Canvas system. Well, it's not going to show up in anybody's district Canvas system because it's in the USBE Canvas system. So this gives you access to register for USBE, and that's how you get access to the course. Again, these are just details that I've gone over. When it says work at your own pace, and again, I have to change the 3rd because it says until September 1st. Even though you finish on June 30th, I'm not sure how quickly we can get the certificate to you, because last time it took quite a while because we had the state superintendent sign it. I signed the certificates. Then we had the state superintendent sign it, and it took a really long time. I think this time, I've talked to Leah Voorhees, and she's now the deputy superintendent. It'll be much easier as soon as you finish that we can start sending out certificates. So that'll be motivation for you to complete the course. Again, there are no grades. It's just credit marked complete or incomplete on the discussion posts. And again, you know, please reply to 2 others using their names to actually personalize it. Last week, we went through the language access policy, very detailed, and Bev knows this probably by heart. And if you want to jump in, Bev, you can. Every district and LEA, a charter school, has to have a language access policy. And Dan Johnson's intention, and Thatcher, of passing this as state law was to make sure that families had access to all the important information in the language that they understand. It doesn't help people if you're sending out language emails or, you know, other communication where your families can't understand the language. And so the language access policy from HB 302 is very specific in relationship to engaging families. And I'm not going to go over the details because it's in the syllabus and it's part of the first module about how important it is for communication for parents in whatever meetings they have. So IEP meetings, counselor meetings, discipline meetings, teacher meetings, family meetings. You know, if the families don't know what's going on, we found this out last year. When I think I mentioned this last time, when a family went to the nurse and said she wanted her children vaccinated. And they said, well, sign this paper. And it was a paper in English that was asking for, um, you know, a way to not have students, not have her students vaccinated. And she kept on saying, but I want them vaccinated. And it was in Spanish and there wasn't an interpreter there. And then they gave her a video, which is interesting because we don't know if, you know, if there actually is any way that a family could actually see the video. And it was in Spanish explaining the opt-out that the nurse wanted her to sign, even though she didn't want to sign it. So these things we always find out, but the only way we find them out is if the people who are in the schools doing interpreters and being interpreters and doing the interpreting, if when we have open conversations, you bring up these issues, because how would we know that that happened? We wouldn't know. So it's really important for you. And sometimes I know it's, you know, a little bit of a challenge to speak out with so many people. We have about 82 on this video, which is significantly less than the 220, but still 82 people. You know, and so the important thing is if you have interpreted in a situation where nobody understands the language access policy, and you have to be strategic when we go over all the standards, you'll see how important your role is. Okay, so I'm not going to go over the HB 302. Bev, do you want to say anything about how thorough it is, or anything about your experience in canyons?
Sure. So I was really fortunate enough to be able to provide input and go to the Hill and provide testimony about why this should be passed. And I want to reiterate what Christelle said. I don't speak another language. I am taking this course with you because I really need to know what my staff, my administrators, when you go into an IEP, what is it that we need to scale up our educators so that that experience is top notch for not only you, but more specifically our parents. So please, I really do welcome the honest comments because it will help me and subsequently the other me's and other LEAs create a better policy, a better training for our principals, our assistant principals, our special ed staff. So I just want to reiterate what Christelle said, that if anything that you provide is not taken as a, oh my gosh, they're complaining about something. It is taken as, we need to fix, or we need to address this and make sure that when families come in with an interpreter or when translation is being asked, that we are doing the best job possible for these families. So that's what I'll say. And if you have questions about why certain things were in here, I did live and breathe this particular bill for a very long time.
There's a hand that's up, so Estefania, you can put your hand down and then just speak up. Make sure you say
Hi.
your name and what district you're from.
My name is Estefania Diaz, and I actually work for the Park City School District. I am an translator, actually. I'm translator in data management. I did work as an interpreter for about 2 years. I did a lot of IEP, and depending on the school, I did charter schools, and then I also did public schools. And one of the things that I found most helpful is when you have to read the parents the guide booklet for the IEP. A few schools actually resume that in like very like small paragraphs. Like they bring out the most important points of it, and then they resume it in little paragraphs. And that way you can either read the paragraph and then read it to the parents, and it just kind of makes it makes you understand what you're talking about a little bit more, and then you're able to tell the parents the message that you're trying to give them like more clearly, rather than having, because sometimes you have like the teachers read the whole thing and then the parent guide, it's pretty intensive, like it's pretty long. So I've seen it in few schools where they just read do like like little paragraphs, and for me that helps a lot.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I think we have another question. So Anthony?
Thank you, Christelle. My name is Anthony. I work at the Academy for Math, Engineering, and Science. And I was wondering about what resources there are to have interpreters available. So, for example, I speak Spanish, and there's a pretty high Spanish speaking population at my school. But the next two largest language groups for our English language learners are actually Vietnamese and Somali. Um, and luckily, those kids are pretty proficient. Their parents can get by as well. But then we have, for example, a freshman who is an Arabic speaker, and his parents do not speak much English. He's only one student in the school that has that access need. But what resources are available to make sure we're meeting those sort of rarer access needs?
Okay, so the biggest thing,
Oh,
okay, I'll say it first and then
you
you
start
can.
and then I'll add it.
Yeah, the biggest thing is, if you actually have a translation services like Proprio, if you have a contract with them, they can actually, it's multiple languages and total access. And if you're more interested in that, you can email me and I'll connect you to a range of districts who use, I don't know if Canyons does, but the other thing is you could also email me because in the last cohort, there is actually an Arabic speaker who is trained. So I could actually connect you with the Arabic speaker. So that's one thing. So Bev?
Anthony, I would also say that fortunately, Arabic is, well, okay, let me go back. First of all, the House Bill 302 also says that school districts are required to do this in the top 5 languages, I believe it is. 5 or 10, Christelle, 5, I think.
Five.
Yep. And so, and other languages, I believe the wording is to the extent reasonable. So the thing is, if an English speaking parent gets that information, and then really we should make every attempt we can to make sure all parents can get the same messaging. There are so many resources right now, and Arabic being one of them. We can't always get an in-person interpreter with a lot of our languages. However, there are so many digital resources, over the phone resources that are really, really solid and do a great job. So I know Christelle can hook you up with all of those, but just wanted to add that too.
Thank you both very
Okay.
much.
Oh, you're welcome. Lucy, so could you just ask a question, then we're gonna have to go on with the standards. So Lucy, your question? So what happened to you? Lucy, you had your hand up?
I think she's muted.
Lucy, you have to unmute yourself.
Hey, Lucy, we can't hear you. Can you get closer to your microphone?
Yeah, we can't hear you at all, and you need to say your name and what school or what district you're working for, but you have to speak really clearly into the microphone because we can't hear what you're saying. Still can't hear you.
Lucy, we can't hear you. If you want to put your question in the chat, I'll try my best to answer it or get on later and address it. How's that sound?
Yeah, if you put it in the chat, then Bev can actually read it. Julia, you have your hand up. You're muted.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Julia and I work with Arroy elementary school with we were school district. I
Yes.
just have a quick question. I never have done IEPs. I've been working more close with kids the are in the class, and helping the teachers to communicate, especially those that they don't have any like the language barrier. So if it comes one day to me that I need help with an IEP, am I allowed to talk to the teacher, whoever's gonna do the meeting, right? And ask a little bit what's it gonna be about so I can have more an idea of what I need to be prepared of?
Yeah, you can, but you have to be very careful about confidentiality. That's why I want to go through the standards.
Okay.
They'll actually help you better understand your professional obligations. Sometimes, if you don't feel, uh, you know, this is about conflict of interest. I mean, one
Mhm.
thing might happen that you're close to the family and you
Mhm.
feel like, in the meeting, you're
Yeah.
more of an advocate and explaining like the
Mhm.
experience of the family. Okay, that's not your role as an interpreter. Your role of an interpreter is to actually communicate accurately what is being said to the parent and what the parent is saying back. So let us get to the standards, and I think that'll actually help you.
Okay. Okay. And I'll ask questions of after. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mhm.
Okay, so the way the standards are organized, if you see it, there are 46 objectives under 8 standards, so just 8 standards. And it's interconnected with ethical principles. Now, the reason it's ethical means another word for ethical is kind of moral, which means, instead of doing it the wrong way that has implications for families for misunderstanding, the goal is to learn the professional way to do it and do it the right way. And that's why every standard has an ethical principle. So the first standard is accuracy and fidelity. And the ethical principle, and I'm just going to read this to you and then we'll have an open discussion about it. You strive, interpreters strive. Now remember, this isn't translation. Translation is written. Interpretation is oral. Strive to render all messages in their entirety accurately, as faithfully as possible, and to the best of their ability without addition, like explaining what someone means, without distortion, omission, or, embellishing or expanding the meaning. Okay, so let's just look at the objectives for a minute, and then we'll have open questions. So remember, the first standard, accuracy and fidelity. You're not explaining to the parent what the teacher or the principal or the special ed person is meaning. Okay, that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to communicate accurately with fidelity what the person is saying, right? To the family. Same thing the opposite way. And if the parent doesn't understand, then you say to the person you're interpreting, if they say to you they don't understand, it's not your role to explain what the principle means. It's the principal's
I'm
obligation.
gonna want salt and pepper.
Okay, make sure you stay muted. It's no problem because I can mute you anyway. Okay, so remember that piece is really important, fidelity. And someone asked me, like there is a sequence about in the course about just jotting down some notes so that you're clear and making sure that, again, you're not explaining the meaning of what the person is saying to the parent. You're saying exactly what the teacher or the person who's leading the meeting, what they're actually saying. Okay, so here are the objectives. Preservation of the meaning of the message. Again, you do this as faithfully as you can, the same grammatical person, as naturally as you can. The idiom and register and style and the tone of the speaker is preserved. So you're trying, which might be a challenge, obviously, because idiomatic expressions are a challenge for anyone. But the goal really is to communicate to the educator that you're going to interpret as accurately as you can. And so even if you meet with them ahead of time and say, I've been trained as an interpreter and I'm going to support exactly what you're saying to the family. Again, the interpreter advises all parties that everything said in the encounter will be interpreted. If any party requests the interpreter refrain from interpreting all utterances, the interpreter is obliged to inform all parties and request and seek direction. So the big thing is, if there's some kind of confusion, you look to the administrator or the one who's facilitating the meeting and saying, well, this seems to be confusing. Can we make it clear? Can you make it clear for me so that I can communicate exactly what you mean? The interpreter retains English words mixed into other languages as well as culturally bound terms. Now, sometimes there might not be a direct equivalent in English, but the goal is to make sure that the meaning is accurate. Because sometimes English is a challenging language because sometimes it has, more than one meaning. So whenever possible, the interpreter will attempt a translation of that word to provide the listener with an idea of what the word means. So it's kind of a big responsibility because you're trying to do it as accurately and with great fidelity. But if there's confusion, that it's your responsibility to help the person who's facilitating know that there is confusion. And it has to be done, so that the person understands exactly what the person who's leading the meeting means. The interpreter uses a mode of interpreting appropriate for this setting. In most interview situations, spoken language, interpreting is done in a consecutive mode. So consecutive means like right after, right? The person says something and then right after. The interpreter performs a summary interpretation. Some of the elements of the communication are not interpreted. So if there's kind of a long stretch and there's confusion, then you ask the administrator, can I summarize it this way? Right? Because remember, the responsibility is on the educator to be clear, and the interpreter is just supporting the understanding of the meaning that is being communicated to the family. Okay, we're going to stop there with just that standard because that's next week we'll do the confidentiality and several others. But what comments or questions do you have? And if you have some, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Ruben.
Hi, Ruben.
I can't find where the little hand is to raise my hand, so I just kind of unmuted myself. I hope that's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I was just going to say on this reminds me a lot of translating in court, where basically you're not summarizing, you're not explaining it. You're just basically there as a conduit from the person that's speaking to the target, and so a lot of times what I found in court was that it was easier for me to just talk to the judges or the lawyers beforehand and tell them, I don't exist. I'm not here. This isn't about me. Please make sure that any points that you're making, you're addressing the defendant or, the witness, and you're letting them know exactly what you're going to say. Because if you say, can the interpreter please say this, we've already lost some of the translation.
Yeah, Ruben, thank you for adding that. It's really important to get clear in an educational context, especially if it's like an example might be, and I'll kind of build on what Ruben has said, if it's a discipline meeting. I mean, if it's a discipline meeting, then, I mean, it, you have to be, really clear. And someone's asking the question, who holds liability in cases of interpretation errors, the school or the interpreter? Okay, liability issues is actually related to confidentiality. So when you're in that meeting, you know, your goal is to just, as Ruben says, to interpret what the person is saying. It's not about, you're not being liable for interpreting what the person is saying. Right? I mean, I think that's the whole thing about it being infidelity. You're interpreting with fidelity and integrity, and you're not adding or summarizing any meaning in the first place, because, you know, if it's in a special ed meeting, and in the course, there are definitions and also translated into Spanish of the meaning, because some of the language, just like in legal cases and medical cases, you know, they're pretty complicated because they're based on the law. They're based on, you know, federal law, just as, you know, translating, you know, either a counselor session or a session for a student who is an English learner, or, you know, a student who is being identified as having special needs, neurodiverse, but there's a misunderstanding because the student is an English learner, but that's not your responsibility at all. Okay, I'm going to call on Erica. And then Bev, you can add. Erica?
Okay. I basically do most of the IEPs helping other people. What I did is I went and I read the manual in Spanish that USBE did, just to familiarize, because I found out that sometimes you got in a pickle with the words, like the terminology, and like what you were saying, we need to be familiarized with those words, and that avoids you to explaining things.
Yeah, and I'm going to check, but I'm pretty sure the link to the USBE IEP vocabulary, I think it's connected to that. And so your whole point about going to the IEP vocabulary and reading it in Spanish, you know, English and Spanish and whatever, and, you know, going to the people and saying, you know, I don't really understand this, or we're going to be using this. So really the responsibility again goes back to the person who's called the meeting. You're interpreting what they're actually saying, right? You're not in any way trying to make meaning of it or explain it in your own words. Okay, so that ends up being, you know, kind of a challenge. So Bev, do you want to?
I was just going to reiterate that that is why the word for word, as much as possible, interpretation, no admissions, substitutions or whatever, is critical. This is probably the number one issue I see when people have issues with an IEP meeting. So Christelle, my question is, let's change that question a little bit. If I don't interpret word for word and I put my own spin on things, does that change liability?
Well, let me just say you shouldn't do that.
Right, exactly. Yes, I 100% agree. I'm just saying that's why, again, just that word for word, as much as possible interpretation, you're not explaining, you are just sharing the words that are being said. And I loved in the some of the videos, I don't remember if it was week 1 or 2, where the responsibility for clarifying lands on the parent in those situations. If it doesn't make sense, I think they mentioned something about, like, we rode a chicken to school, right? If they don't understand what that means, really, we need to let the parent say, I don't understand, even if it doesn't make sense to us. And that was really powerful for me, who doesn't interpret.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. And part of it goes to this, when we get to another standard, it's this idea of when you have a relationship with a family and, the administrator calls you to do an IEP meeting, okay, you can actually recuse yourself and say, I have a relationship with this family and I've been their advocate. And so advocating for them is what I've always done. And so the families have asked me to make sure that I do that. And then you have to actually explain to the family that you're just interpreting that you're not expanding on what you know about their family. Now, this is a big challenge, because if you're connected to a family and you feel that you've been an advocate and you're kind of responsible for their well-being, you have to make sure that they understand that that's not your role if in fact you decide to interpret for them. So I hope that's helpful. What other questions do you have? Heather?
Thanks. Sorry, I can't find my, I've been looking and looking for their hand. Okay, I've got 2 questions and you
Yes.
probably answered them, but I just need clarification. First of all, I've been doing this for a long time because in Wyoming, I was like the only,
Yeah.
Spanish speaker in my district. And so I put a lot of stuff into my posts about that because I've been through a lot of things, which have been good, but now I'm learning I did it the wrong way. First of all, but that's good. It's a learning experience.
Yeah, not the wrong way. You did it the best. So
Just-
remember the language. You did it the
I
best
did the
you
language
could.
to the best of my ability. I just didn't, I was
That's right.
doing things that didn't go with the course. And so I've learned from that. So 2 things. First of all, what if you're the only person in the district? And I know down here, there's so many people that speak, but where I'm from, there are not. And so I've been in 4 different districts in Wyoming before I came here, and I was the only speaker in every district. And so trying to recuse myself, I couldn't. What do you do in that situation? Even though I felt like a lot of times I should have, or I wished I could have, because of the situation I was in, I felt like obligated to do it. So I guess that goes along with what you were saying of just telling the family, hey, I'm just here interpreting, or what do you do in that situation?
Well, you just say, I'm an interpreter.
Okay. So.
And then the other thing is, you're not going to, the other thing is Wyoming doesn't have a language access policy. This is a state
True.
law.
That's true. That is
So-
true. Thank you. I forgot about that. And
So the
who knows if
consequence-
they'll ever get one. So.
Well, let's don't talk about that.
I know, I love them anyway, but here we go. Okay, the second one was loving the families the way we all do. That's why we want to help them and the kids. I feel like it's always my job, and just tell me no, Heather, it's not, to check for understanding, because we do that with our kiddos. And so as we're interpreting, in the past, I've always turned and said, did you understand that? And I guess now that's not really my position to do. That's just, I interpret exactly what's said. I don't check for understanding with them. I just let that simmer and hope that they will say, because I've had families that didn't know how to read. And I found out later on, they give them the packet and say, here you go. I didn't know at the time they didn't know how to read. They didn't want to tell me. I found out later. So there are a lot of things that you want to check for understanding, but that is not to be done by us.
Bev can add on to this. I have a certain.
Thank you.
I have a
So-
certain viewpoint. I have a
Okay.
certain viewpoint of that, and when we
Okay.
get to the standard where it talks about advocacy and conflict of interest, it might be clear. But Bev, do you
Okay.
want to share your viewpoint?
Yeah, and I think there's a really, I don't want to say simple answer,
Yeah.
right? But I feel like if you just let the whoever, the principal, the special education educator, whatever it is, say, I have a relationship with this family. So for your first question, what if I'm the only speaker, right? You
Yeah.
can have a relationship. I can't recuse myself. I'm going to try my best. I'm just going to interpret. So you say that to the family, but you also let the school staff know as well, right? The other, with your question about the checking for understanding, it's the same way. You look to that person, whoever's leading the meeting, to say, are you okay if I check for understanding? I'm going to ask them X, Y, and Z. And if they're like, okay, so then you ask, and then you say exactly what they say, what you said and what they replied.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say this one more time. The responsibility of the meeting is not you. It is the person who called the meeting. The principal, the teacher, whoever it is. You have to be very clear about that. This is not your responsibility to make meaning for anyone, right? It's the educator. He's the one or she's the one. That's his or her job. And they should know the language access policy. And if they don't, which ends up being problematic, I won't talk about, people who don't have the policy don't get funded, frankly. It's state law. There's no way around it. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. N. Jennings, I don't know what your first name is. Sorry.
Come up. My name is Natalie Jennings. I work at Providence Hall. I was wondering if when there is a lack of vocabulary in a specific conversation, what do you do? Like somebody mentioned before, like IEP terminology. Are you allowed to like pull up a dictionary? Like, what do you do?
Okay, once you go through the course, this will be easier. Right now, you're just kind of learning. And I'm just going to say that the standards are pretty clear about all of this, and also the videos that help you better understand, how it is you negotiate the kind of language that ends up being challenging for family. And again, it's the responsibility of the educator. It's not your responsibility as an interpreter. Shall I write this on my forehead?
I'm wondering, like, personally, if I don't know the vocabulary.
Well, then it's your responsibility to actually, as someone already said, they went to the US, and it's in the course, the USBE Spanish IEP language forms. And so, your goal is to actually meet with the administrator, the person who's doing it, and then say to them, I'm concerned that I don't know the language that you're going to use. I mean, this is just, the goal is really, I'll say it again. The goal is not your goal. The goal is the responsibility of the educator to support the interpretation that's going to happen, right? I mean, that's really the important thing. And the reason I'm saying this is, and this happened last year in the cohort of like 110 people. You're here because you care about students and families. And that is good, and that's fine. That's why we're doing this. But the goal is for you to be trained as a professional, right? That's the point. You're not being paid to actually assume the responsibility of the educator. But if you need help in relationship to the language that's going to be used, then you would actually go to the educator who's calling the meeting and express that. Bev, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we educators are really excited about our acronyms. We have IEPs and we have this and we have that. I think that if an acronym is used and you don't know, I would rather have you say, I want to interpret exactly what you said. I don't know what an IEP is, right? Can you explain that to me? And then, right? Or I don't have a word for audio visual, whatever it is, right? In my language. How else could I explain that? Those are the kinds of things I think just communicating with the school staff that's in the meeting just goes a long, long way, because I'll just tell you from my experience, what happens is there's a lot of talk and people in the IEP are like, okay, I said 3 words and now we've had 2.5 minutes of conversation, right? Just that little statement of, I don't know what that means. I need to explain it a different way because in my language, we don't have this word or this word, goes just a long way for building trust and making sure the message is relayed accurately.
Can I add something?
Mhm.
Can I add something?
Yes, Victor, just
Yeah.
could you say what district you're from?
Of course, I'm Victor Garcia and I am from Box Elder School District. So usually when I got invited to translate in a IEP meeting, I request, because usually it's a specialist or nurse, district nurse, or someone that is leading the meeting, right? So what I've done is I request a copy of the report just for me as an interpreter. So if there is a word that I don't understand or something, I can look for it while the person is speaking to translate accuracy in an accurate way to the person. That's what I've done I don't know if this happens in every single district, but in my district, they are willing to do that for me. Like just a copy for me, just to translate the information that you are going to read to the parent. And that worked very well.
Yeah, there people are asking about the link for the IEP at USBE. I'm not going to share the link, and the reason I'm not going to, it's in the class. I mean, it's actually in the course. It's embedded in the course. And so the reason it's embedded in the course is so that you can understand the context of it in relationship to the standards. Right. If you go back and you reread standard 1, it's actually reiterating what most of us are saying. So, you know, the fact that you're asking these questions is great. The important thing is that you go into the course and you take it very seriously in relationship to the standards that are being shared with you so that you can be a professional. Go back to the standard 1 and reread it again. So, Priscilla, do you have your hand up?
Hi, yes, I'm Priscilla, Portuguese interpreter for Davis School District. I just wanted to suggest I've done IEPs as well. You can always go online and Google common terms used in IEPs, make your own glossary, have those words ready, like acronyms. You can tell them, even in English, you can say, this is called an IEP. You can use the letters IEP and then tell them in Spanish or whatever your native language of what that means. And you can also, when they give you the paperwork, you can ask them, would you like me to sight translate this? So you have the document in front of you in English, and then you are basically verbally translating what it is written in there to the parents. Or you can ask like the nurse or the language pathologist, whoever is doing the paperwork, if they want to read it in English, and then you translate it, then you interpret from her talking in English to your native language to the parents. So that's how you kind of make a little connection there. And is that those are my suggestions from personal experiences, but of course we have other people for other suggestions as well. So I just wanted to bring that up.
No, Priscilla,
Thank
I
you.
think that's really important because it shows, like, even if you have even if you have Microsoft Word, there's a function for translating anything. So you
Yeah.
just look it up, and then you make your list of vocabulary words or whatever you want. That'll be in the course. But the question also is how you use technology to help you better understand the language of education, because you're right, there are a lot of acronyms. And a lot of terms like the individual learning plan for a student learning English. Most people don't even know what that is, right?
Or-
Including educators. And so that's the other thing. You're not going to learn. So this is the other thing. You're not going to learn everything instantly all the time. And yes, you are going to come up against roadblocks. It's not going to be perfect, and you're going to always be learning. That's why we have these Zoom sessions, to learn from and with each other. That's the point. So Priscilla, did you want to add something else?
Just like with acronyms as well, how in schools we use lots of different apps, learning apps like Lexia and iReady. Those are not words that we can, at least not in my language, that we can translate it to, because those are names, proper nouns. So then I try to make sure that I'm telling them like this is in an app, a learning app, Lexia, and I kind of want them to get used to the word Lexia so that they can tell their students, are you on Lexia? Do your Lexia, get on Lexia. So at least they know what Lexia is. So it's also a learning opportunity for them as well.
Yeah, someone is actually asked Lucy. We only have 5 more minutes. And this has been a great session. Last week, it was very tentative and there weren't as many people on, but having 82 people on, makes a difference. That's what you call a learning community. If you're learning new things, naturally you're going to experiment and you're going to do things and then come back and think, oh, I should have done it differently. Well, everybody, that's the whole point of learning together, learning from people's experiences. So Lucy is saying, there is a way that LEAs and teachers can get this information about about the role of an interpreter. Okay, so this is the issue that's come up. Provo's done a really good job. They actually took this course, and any district can do this. Weber is doing it.
Canyons.
Canyons is doing it. Jordan is doing it. They're taking the level 1 interpreter course and they're putting it into their Canvas system, and they're certifying like all their interpreters. And the administrators will know too. So that's the point of doing this. The point of doing this is that we actually upscale our knowledge about the role of interpretation based on state law. This is not like an either or thing. This is law, which means that we all have to learn what's in the law, and we have to provide that which is making, engaging families in the education of their students. We're doing this for students. There's someone else who's saying,
And I add something.
So can I just read some? Wait a minute? So I'm going to read something from someone else. This is from Tooele School District. If I remember correctly, the special ed teacher can also translate the IEP in Spanish. I've been in IEP meetings where the special ed teacher hands me a copy of the IEP paperwork in Spanish for the parents. The entire IEP can be translated and makes it much easier. Okay, by state law, this is an obligation. I mean, this is not, this is not just one district doing a good job.
Right.
Just to let you know. So I'm sorry that I'm being very blunt here, but the reason I'm being very blunt and very clear is that this is not a choice. This is not a choice to respect families' language. And now that it's state law, it was federal law before, but oftentimes, people weren't paying attention to federal law. Now it's state law, and we have a language access policy that ensures that this is the way Utah is doing interpretation for their families.
And
so
a comment
there on that. Remember too, that if I'm presenting the IEP prior to the meeting, that's assuming that parents have agreed to everything, right? So that's one of the reasons why that's not provided. I believe all LEAs now have some sort of system to translate that ahead of time. It's just we're presuming that is going to be the IEP, and we don't want that to get confused with what actually is decided upon in that meeting. However, I think that's a good first step, but I would take whatever is handed to you, and that should be shredded or whatever in lieu of a finalized IEP. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, the next standard actually is confidentiality, which is like a gigantic, huge thing. It says Davis District also has the Canvas course for all employees about interpretation. So is it Milette Ortega? You were trying to say something.
Yes, I'm a special education teacher, so I know I'm pretty familiar with all the acronyms. One thing is we shouldn't share the information of the IEP with other people. The confidentiality, the law is very specific about that, but we can have a good communication with the teacher in order to ask the teacher to be very explicit about the acronyms because parents don't know. So the teacher can say behavior intervention plan instead of say BIP. So that's a good way to start and try to interpret all the information. So I think keep that communication with the teacher and let the teacher know that as much explicit the teacher can be, we can interpreting better. In Jordan District, I work for Jordan School District. There's a small group. We have a group of interpreters that are really very familiar with all the special education word. But I think, yeah, it's very important to try to be really explicit about what is an IEP and all the acronyms that we use.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think, Jeff, you had your hand up or you were going to talk. Jeff?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I sent you an email, but Box Elder, we would love to be able to offer that course in the future to our employees. That's one of the main reasons I'm here, is so that we can train everybody. As the language access coordinator from our district, we want access to language for everybody. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'll actually put you on as a teacher to the course. So I know you're doing the course, but I can also put you on as a teacher. And so then when you transfer everything, into your own Canvas system, then it's accessible for everybody. And that's what Provo has done. And I think Canyons is doing it, Nebo's doing it, Jordan's doing it. So again, I just want to thank all of you. It's already 8:02, and I'm going to promise to, end the meeting at 8:02, the recording at least. And I don't want to stay later than 8:30, but I'll stay on for a couple of questions that are personal. My biggest thing is register for the course, get on Canvas USB-E, take every module seriously, and do your very, very best. And, respond to other people. I mean, this has been like a great session. As soon as the recording is organized by the IT people at USB-E, then I'll send it out to you with the revised syllabus. Okay, so thank you again for coming. I'm going to stop the recording and you can have your evening off. Bev, I'm going to have you stay just for a minute. Okay.